An engine roars, then sputters a sudden sickening jolt that rips through the aircraft, slamming passengers back into their seats. Before the screams can fully erupt, the captain's voice cuts through the cabin not with reassurance, but with a chilling finality that freezes the very air. This aircraft is returning to the gate. Security will be boarding. In that terrifying silence, 11-year-old Lyra Vance feels the world tilt on its axis. Every eye on the plane, dozens, then hundreds, swivels toward her. A sea of strangers once lost in their own worlds of headphones and magazines are now suddenly terrifyingly united in their judgment of her. Do you know that feeling when you become the sudden, unwanted center of everyone's attention, like the air has been sucked out of your lungs? If you do, hit that subscribe button, because you're going to understand the storm Lyra was about to walk into. Tears, hot and sharp, threaten at the corners of her eyes, but she forces them back. She stands frozen in the aisle, a lone small figure against a backdrop of hostile stares. In her trembling hand, she clutches the boarding pass. The crisp paper is a lifeline, a testament to reality. It clearly shows seat 3B, her seat. The seat now occupied by a scowling, middle-aged man who refuses to make eye contact with anyone but the flight attendant. "I paid for first class," he insists, his voice a low growl through clenched teeth. "And I'm not giving up my seat to accommodate some disruption." The word hangs in the recycled air, heavy and poisonous, thick with implication. Lyra's father, Daniel Vance, moves to stand protectively beside his daughter. His normally composed demeanor, the calm that has navigated countless high-stakes boardrooms, is now a barely contained storm of fury. "My daughter's seat." He says, his voice a deliberate calm that belies the white-knuckle tension in his shoulders was purchased weeks ago. She has the boarding pass right here to prove it. The flight attendant, a young woman caught in a crossfire she never trained for, looks between them, conflict and panic etched across her face. All around them, a ripple of whispers travels through the cabin, weaving a tapestry of rumor and accusation. What no one yet realizes is that in exactly 4 minutes, this mundane dispute over a patch of leather and legroom will escalate into a situation that changes lives forever. It will unearth truths that some passengers have spent entire lifetimes trying to hide. But to understand how we got here, how an 11-year-old black girl from Austin who quietly built a tech empire worth billions from the cluttered desk in her bedroom could find herself at the epicenter of a confrontation that would soon make national headlines, we need to rewind. We need to go back to where this fateful day truly began, in the pre-dawn quiet of the Vance family home. The alarm chirps softly at 4:30 a.m., but Lyra is already awake. Sleep had proven elusive, a skittish creature that shied away from the buzz of anticipation in her mind. It often did before big meetings. Her bedroom at first glance looks like any other creative child's sanctuary. Stuffed animals, a narwhal, a platypus, a red panda are arranged in a careful menagerie on a cushioned window seat. Ribbons from science fairs and coding competitions are pinned proudly to a corkboard. Her bookshelf overflows with dog-eared paperbacks, worn copies of fantasy epics, and biographies of women who changed the world. But the sleek, humming command center in the corner tells a different story entirely. 3 monitors glow in the dim light, displaying waterfalls of scrolling code, complex financial projections, and the latest user engagement statistics for Etheria, the educational gaming platform Lyra created when she was just 9. Etheria is now used in schools and homes across 47 countries, a digital universe born from a child's imagination. "Big day, huh?" Firefly. A familiar voice, warm and rumbling, appears in the doorway. Daniel Vance holds 2 steaming mugs, the rich scent of coffee and hot chocolate filling the room. The childhood nickname still fits her somehow, this small, quick-minded girl who illuminates any room she enters, soaring higher and shining brighter than anyone ever expects. Lyra accepts the hot chocolate, gratefully wrapping her small hands around the ceramic warmth. Nervous, she admits, her voice barely a whisper. The Horizon Ventures investors. They're old school. They expect someone different. Daniel sits on the edge of her bed, his own coffee forgotten, as he studies his daughter's face. At 48, he's learned to read the subtle topography of her anxiety, the way she tucks a stray braid behind her ear repeatedly, the slight, almost imperceptible furrow between her brows. They expect someone who doesn't look like me, Lyra clarifies, meeting her father's eyes with a directness that holds a universe of shared understanding. This is their unspoken truth, the invisible current they navigate daily in the predominantly white male world of tech and high finance. A black girl from Texas isn't exactly what pops into people's heads when they hear the term tech billionaire. It's a reality they don't complain about, but one they must always be prepared for. Then today, Daniel says his voice, simple and steady as bedrock, is the day their heads get rewired. A former software architect who left a lucrative corporate job to become the first full-time employee and chief operating officer of his daughter's burgeoning company. He's learned that sometimes the most powerful thing he can do is acknowledge the truth of a challenge without ever letting it become a barrier. You're not walking into that room to prove you belong there, Firefly, he continues, leaning in. You are walking in because they need what you've built. Remember that. Lyra nods, drawing strength from the absolute, unwavering certainty in her father's voice. In the soft morning light, dressed in her galaxy print pajamas, and with the stuffed platypus she's had since she was 3. Tucked under her arm, she looks like any other kid. Few would ever guess that the revolutionary learning algorithm she developed in this very room is changing how children with neurological differences interact with educational material, or that her company's valuation had crossed the billion-dollar threshold 6 months ago, a fact they'd meticulously kept under wraps to protect her privacy. Seattle. Here we come, she says, attempting a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Something about this trip feels different, a faint, low hum of unease under the surface of her excitement, a premonition she can't pinpoint or explain. As Daniel helps her pack the last of her things, a presentation clicker, a lucky pen, a small sketchbook, neither of them can possibly know how chillingly prophetic that feeling of unease will prove to be. 2 hours later, Austin Bergstrom International Airport buzzes with the frantic energy of early morning travelers. The Vances move through security with the well-practiced efficiency of frequent flyers. Lyra's passport, thick with extra pages, shows stamps from Tokyo, London, Singapore, Berlin, a world map of pitches, conferences, and partnership meetings that have taken her around the globe. Today's meeting with Horizon Ventures in Seattle could mean expanding Etheria's reach to underserved and indigenous communities globally, a core mission that makes the grueling travel schedules and missed time with friends worthwhile. Dad, did you remember to pack my presentation thumb drive? Lyra asks suddenly, pausing in the chaos of the main terminal. Daniel pats his breast pocket with a knowing smile. Right here. Plus the backup in my carry-on, and another copy uploaded to the cloud. Triple redundancy, just like you taught me. This small exchange, the child reminding the parent, reassuring, perfectly captures the unique fluid dynamic between them. Their roles often shift and blend. Sometimes Daniel is the fiercely protective father shielding his daughter from a world not yet ready for her. At other times, he's the supportive executive answering to his visionary CEO. They have learned to dance between these identities seamlessly, each one filling in the gaps for the other, a two-person team against the world. At the gate, Lyra reviews her presentation notes on her tablet, while Daniel makes a quick call to their driver in Seattle. Around them, the usual airport tableau unfolds: business travelers hammering away on laptops, families trying to corral overexcited children, solo travelers lost in books or podcasts. No one pays particular attention to the unassuming father-daughter pair, and that's exactly how they prefer it. Lyra's company has been quietly featured in niche business magazines and tech blogs, but they have ferociously guarded her privacy, limiting photos and refusing televised interviews. Her innovations, not her age or her appearance, are what she wants the world to focus on. Now, boarding Group A for Flight 714 to Seattle. A voice crackles over the speakers. Daniel gathers their things as Lyra tucks her tablet carefully into her backpack. "Ready, Firefly?" he asks, the question layered with meaning far beyond just the boarding call. Lyra takes a deep breath, squaring her small shoulders beneath her neat, custom-tailored blazer, a garment that is at once professional and unmistakably designed for a child. She nods. Ready. They join the priority line, boarding passes in hand. Lyra's ticket clearly shows seat 3B, a window seat in first class. Daniel's ticket is for an economy seat 5 rows behind the divider. This is a deliberate choice. He could easily afford first-class tickets for them both, but these small decisions are part of the careful balance they maintain, providing Lyra the comfort and space she needs for important business trips, while simultaneously teaching her about the value of money and the nature of privilege. It's a lesson in humility he believes is as important as any financial projection. "I'll be right back there if you need anything," Daniel reminds her, as they reach the front of the line, his voice a low, reassuring rumble. "Just push the call button or text me." Lyra nods, her posture subtly shifting as she hands her boarding pass to the gate agent. A composure settles over her like a cloak. Daniel recognizes it instantly. It's her business mode, the same focused, poised presence she brings to intimidating boardrooms and high-pressure investor meetings. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Vance," the gate agent says, scanning her pass with a warm, professional smile that falters for only a fraction of a second upon realizing the passenger's age. "Enjoy your flight to Seattle." Lyra thanks her politely and steps onto the jet bridge, a threshold between the world she knows and a future she's building. She is blissfully unaware that the carefully controlled universe she and her father have so meticulously constructed is about to collide with forces they could never have anticipated. Because despite her extraordinary achievements, despite the wealth she's generated, and the lives her technology has profoundly improved to some of the people boarding Flight 714 today, Lyra Vance will never be more than what they first see: a black child in a space they have decided with absolute certainty she does not belong. The first-class cabin of Flight 714 gleams with the muted, anonymous luxury of soft leather seats and an abundance of legroom. Lyra moves confidently toward seat 3B, her small, rolling carry-on gliding silently behind her. She's flown often enough to navigate the intricate rituals of air travel with practiced ease: where to stow her bag, how to adjust her seat, the polite, fleeting nods exchanged with the flight attendants. From his seat 5 rows back in economy, Daniel watches his daughter settle in a familiar, bittersweet mix of immense pride and gnawing anxiety stirring within him. Every time Lyra steps away from his protective presence, he feels it, that small catch in his throat, the silent, fervent prayer that the world will see her as he does, brilliant, deserving, and so much more than the sum of other people's cramped expectations. The steady stream of passengers continues to board. A distinguished-looking woman in her 60s, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, takes the aisle seat across from Lyra, offering a cordial smile that Lyra returns with polite sincerity. A young man with wireless earbuds already blasting music claims the seat beside the woman, barely looking up from his phone. The atmosphere is tranquil, the usual pre-flight murmur, creating a cocoon of white noise, a perfect environment for Lyra to review her presentation notes one final time. The calm shatters when a latecomer rushes into the first-class cabin. He's a man in his 50s, with a thatch of salt and pepper hair and an expensive rumpled suit that bears the signs of a harried, stressful morning. His face is flushed, and his expression darkens as he scans the row numbers with growing impatience. "Excuse me," he says, his voice sharp and demanding as he stops abruptly at Lyra's row, checking his own boarding pass with a frown. "I believe you're in my seat." Lyra looks up momentarily confused. She double-checks her own boarding pass, holding it up for him to see. "This is 3B. The man Richard Harrison, though Lyra doesn't yet know his name, glances from the small child to the boarding pass she holds out. His frown deepens into a scowl. "There must be some mistake. I specifically booked this seat." A flight attendant, noticing the brewing conflict, hurries over. Her name tag reads Chloe. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," Richard snaps before Lyra can respond. "I believe there's been a mix-up with the seating assignments." "This girl is in my seat." Lyra speaks up, her voice clear, despite its softness, a small island of calm in a rising tide of tension. "My boarding pass says 3B. That's the seat I booked." Chloe gently takes both boarding passes to examine them. Her professional expression betrays nothing as she confirms what Lyra has already stated. "Ms. Vance is correctly seated in 3B, sir. Let me double-check your assignment." Richard's jaw tightens visibly, a small muscle pulsing in his cheek. "That's impossible. I always book this exact seat on this route." "Check it again." Chloe scans his boarding pass with a practiced patience that seems to infuriate him further. "Mr. Harrison, your assigned seat is actually 15C in Economy Plus." Economy. The word explodes from him with such raw indignation that several nearby passengers look up from their devices. "That is absolutely ridiculous. I have been a Platinum Elite member for 15 years. I never fly economy." "I understand your frustration, sir, but the plane is nearly full. This has to be fixed." Richard interrupts, his voice rising, gaining an aggressive edge. "I have a critical meeting directly after landing. I need to work during this flight." Chloe maintains her professional composure, a fortress against his escalating anger. "I'd be happy to check if there are any other first-class seats available, but at the moment, it appears we are fully booked in this cabin." Richard's furious gaze shifts from the flight attendant to Lyra. She sits perfectly still, a silent observer in a drama about her own existence, acutely aware of the invasive scrutiny now directed at her from the surrounding passengers. His next words are slow, deliberate, each one dripping with condescension. "Surely, there's some flexibility here. Perhaps the young lady wouldn't mind relocating. I doubt she needs the workspace as urgently as I do." The implication hangs in the air, as clear and ugly as a smear of grease on a clean window. Chloe's professional smile becomes fixed, a mask of courtesy. "Sir, Ms. Vance has a confirmed reservation for this seat. I cannot ask her to relocate." "Come on." Richard lowers his voice, leaning closer to Chloe, attempting a conspiratorial tone. "Be reasonable. Look at her. She's what, 10, 11. How important could her reasons for being in first class possibly be?" A hot flush rises to Lyra's cheeks. She's encountered this before the dismissal, the assumptions based on the color of her skin and the youth in her face, but it never stings any less. For a fleeting second, she considers offering to switch, just to end the mounting discomfort, to extinguish the spotlight of unwanted attention. But then her father's voice echoes in her mind, a mantra of self-worth he'd repeated to her for years: "Never surrender your rightful place. just to make someone else comfortable with their own prejudice. Before she can decide how to respond, a new voice enters the conversation. It comes from the older woman seated across the aisle. "Excuse me," she says, her tone pleasant, but carrying an unmistakable note of steel. I couldn't help but overhear. The woman, elegantly dressed with intelligent gray eyes that seem to miss nothing, looks directly at Richard. Perhaps I might offer a solution. My seat is 3D just across the aisle. I would be more than happy to trade with the young lady. That would solve the immediate issue, wouldn't it? She would have a first-class seat, and you could remain in this cabin. Richard hesitates, clearly thrown by this unexpected intervention. That's very kind of you, but it's no trouble at all," the woman continues smoothly, her gaze unwavering. "Though I must admit I am intensely curious as to why you assume a child's business in Seattle is inherently less important than your own. Appearances, after all, can be so terribly deceiving. There's a subtle, sharp edge to her otherwise pleasant tone that lands with precision." The other first-class passengers have gone completely quiet now, watching the drama unfold with rapt attention. Richard looks around suddenly, aware of how this situation must appear to an outside observer. His expression shifts calculation, replacing the raw outrage, as he realizes the older woman has offered him a graceful, face-saving exit from an increasingly awkward confrontation. "That is very generous of you," he says finally, his voice forcibly controlled. "Thank you." As the woman rises to collect her things, she introduces herself to Lyra with a warm smile. "Eleanor Vance. A pleasure to meet you, dear." Wait, did she say Vance? What are the odds? A coincidence, surely. Hit that like button if you think there's more to Eleanor Vance than meets the eye. Let me know your theories in the comments. Lyra. She replies, still a little stunned. Lyra Vance. Thank you, Ms. Vance. Not at all. Eleanor waves away her thanks with a flick of her wrist. Truthfully, I prefer the window seat anyway. Enjoy the view. As they rearrange themselves, Eleanor moving gracefully across the aisle. Richard sullenly taking the aisle seat she vacated. Lyra catches her father's concerned gaze from the economy section. She gives him a small, almost imperceptible nod to indicate that all is well, though the encounter has left her feeling deeply unsettled. She can feel Richard Harrison's resentment radiating from the seat across the aisle, a palpable weight of assumption and judgment. What Lyra doesn't know, what no one aboard Flight 714 could possibly know, is that this minor ugly seating dispute is merely the first domino to fall. It is the small, seemingly insignificant event that will set in motion a chain reaction of consequences, exposing long-buried secrets, challenging deeply held beliefs, and ultimately forcing everyone involved to confront truths about themselves they have spent years, and in some cases entire fortunes, desperately avoiding. As the final passengers board and the cabin crew prepares for departure, the real story of this flight, the one that will make headlines and change the course of multiple lives, is only just beginning to unfold. The engines rumble to life as Flight 714 begins its slow, deliberate taxi toward the runway. Lyra tucks her boarding pass carefully into her tablet case, trying to shake off the lingering discomfort from the confrontation. Across the aisle, Richard Harrison makes a great show of spreading out his work materials, a laptop, a thick binder of documents, a gold-plated pen pointedly avoiding eye contact with the child he clearly still believes has no business being in his rarefied airspace. In economy, Daniel Vance keeps a watchful eye forward, his attention divided between the novel in his hands and the occasional glimpse of his daughter's head just visible over the top of her seat. He had witnessed enough of the interaction to understand its ugly nature. Another bitter entry in the long, exhausting catalogue of slights and assumptions they have encountered throughout Lyra's remarkable journey. Pardon me. A voice breaks into his thoughts. Is that seat taken? Daniel looks up to find Eleanor Vance standing in the aisle, gesturing to the empty middle seat beside him. The same elegant woman who had just diffused the situation in first class by giving up her seat. No, please, he says, shifting to make room for her. Have a seat. Eleanor Vance, she offers with a warm smile as she settles in. Daniel Vance, he replies, a flicker of surprise in his eyes at the shared surname. That was a remarkably kind thing you did up there. Thank you. Eleanor's eyes show a flash of recognition at his last name, a look that seems to go beyond the mere coincidence of their names. But she simply says it seemed the most straightforward solution to a needlessly complicated problem. After a beat of silence, she adds more quietly, her voice tinged with a world-weary wisdom. Some people are just remarkably resistant to having their core assumptions challenged, aren't they? Daniel studies her with a new, deeper interest. You didn't have to give up your seat. Perhaps not, she concedes. But your daughter shouldn't have had to defend her right to occupy a space she paid for either. Eleanor's matter-of-fact tone holds no request for gratitude or any acknowledgement of sacrifice, just a simple statement of principle that resonates deeply with Daniel. It's a principle he's tried to instill in Lyra her entire life. Their burgeoning conversation is interrupted by the captain's voice crackling over the intercom, welcoming passengers aboard the 3.5-hour flight to Seattle. The standard announcements follow expected weather conditions, cruising altitude, estimated arrival time. The comforting familiarity of the routine allows Lyra to gradually relax, to open her tablet and review her presentation one last time before allowing herself the simple pleasure of enjoying the window view during takeoff. As the plane accelerates down the runway and lifts powerfully into the sky, the sprawling urban expanse of Austin falls away beneath them. Lyra watches the city of her birth, a place of vibrant energy, complex history, and fierce creative resilience, transform into a miniature, intricate model of itself. There's something centering about this perspective, this God's eye view. It's a powerful visual reminder that problems that loom large and insurmountable on the ground often shrink when viewed from a great enough height. Back in economy, Daniel and Eleanor discover a shared interest in technology, he in software architecture. She says, in ethical AI development. Their conversation flows with an easy, unforced rhythm, touching on career paths, recent technological innovations, and eventually the unique challenges of raising a profoundly gifted child. She's truly remarkable, Eleanor observes after Daniel shares a carefully edited, humble version of Lyra's achievements, though I imagine it hasn't always been an easy road to travel. Daniel offers a measured, weary smile. There have been obstacles. Some expected, others less so. The expected ones being the usual trifecta of ignorance Eleanor surmises with uncanny accuracy. Age, gender, race. Take your pick. He keeps his voice light, but the accumulated weight of years fighting these invisible battles shows in the slight tightness around his eyes. The tech world talks a big game about being a meritocracy, but the reality is, people see what they expect to see, and they treat people accordingly. Eleanor finishes for him, her voice quiet but firm. Daniel nods, struck by how precisely, how effortlessly she's articulated the central struggle of their lives. Exactly. Sometimes I think the hardest part of my job, not as COO, but as her father, is teaching her how to navigate that ugly reality without letting it diminish her own brilliant sense of possibility. Up in first class, Lyra has pulled out her leather-bound sketchbook, a habit she's maintained since childhood. It's where she jots down ideas and designs, the raw, unfiltered sparks of creativity that often become the seeds of new features for Etheria. Her current project is a revolutionary one, adapting the platform for children with severe visual impairments, creating a system of complex sensory and haptic feedback that would make digital learning truly accessible. Richard Harrison. Despite his determined focus on the spreadsheets glowing on his laptop, finds his attention repeatedly drawn to the intricate, complex sketches taking shape under the child's pencil. His professional curiosity. The instinct of a man who has spent his life in technology gradually begins to overcome his lingering, bitter resentment. He recognizes what she's drawing schematics for a complex circuit board far beyond what any child should be capable of conceiving. "That's an interesting approach," he comments finally, his tone now neutral, his curiosity overriding his prejudice. A haptic feedback system. Lyra looks up, surprised by the overture. "Yes, I'm trying to design something more intuitive and responsive than what's currently available on the market." "For what application?" She hesitates. Years of cautious media training and NDAs have made her automatically guard details of unreleased projects. But his question was specific, and her professional enthusiasm wins out. It's for educational technology for visually impaired students. The existing options are either prohibitively expensive for most families or far too simplistic to engage older learners. Richard's eyebrows rise slightly. This is not the answer he expected, not from a child he'd dismissed as a mere placeholder. "You're designing this yourself." "It's a collaborative effort," Lyra acknowledges, ever humble. "I have a team of engineers who help me refine the technical specifications and work out the bugs, but the core concept and the initial design, that's mine." The conversation might have continued. It might have even begun to bridge the vast, ugly gulf of misunderstanding between them. But at that exact moment, the flight hits a violent patch of turbulence. The fasten seatbelt signs illuminate with a soft, insistent chime as the plane gives a sudden gut-wrenching lurch. Lyra grips her armrests, her stoic expression, betraying only a slight telltale tension around her eyes. Richard, distracted by trying to steady his precariously balanced laptop, doesn't notice the child's silent discomfort. But someone else does. From the middle rows of economy, a woman in her early 30s is suddenly on her feet, moving quickly and purposefully against the flight attendant's urgent instructions to remain seated. She pushes forward into the first-class cabin, her expression a mask of focused concern. "Lyra." She calls out, her voice cutting through the cabin noise as she scans the premium seats until she spots the girl. "Are you okay?" The woman, dressed in sharp business attire, her hair pulled back in a professional bun, stops beside Lyra's seat, completely ignoring the flight attendant Chloe, who follows close behind her. Deep breaths remember in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Lyra nods gratefully, her small shoulders rising and falling as she follows the familiar breathing pattern. The woman places a reassuring hand on her shoulder, a small anchor in a turbulent sea. "Ma'am, I need you to return to your seat immediately," Chloe insists, her voice strained. "We are experiencing significant turbulence. Just give me 1 minute," the woman responds without looking away from Lyra. She has acute anxiety during turbulence. "Are you her mother?" Chloe asks, confusion evident in her voice as she looks between the two of them. "No," the woman replies matter-of-factly. "I'm her chief financial officer. My name is Maya Ortiz. I work for her." This statement delivered without a hint of fanfare, but with the unmistakable seriousness of a bedrock truth, causes a ripple of stunned reaction through the entire first-class cabin. Richard Harrison's head snaps up, his expression cycling rapidly through disbelief, confusion, and a dawning, shocking comprehension. Works. For her, He repeats his voice, a disbelieving whisper, as he looks at the 11-year-old girl with new, bewildered eyes. What exactly do you— His question is cut short by another violent bout of turbulence far more severe than the first. The plane drops suddenly, a terrifying plunge that feels like a stone falling through empty space. It steadies just as quickly, but the momentary free fall is enough to send Maya stumbling hard against the bulkhead. That's it, Chloe says firmly, her voice now brooking no argument. Everyone needs to be in their assigned seats with their seatbelts fastened. Now Maya gives Lyra's hand a final reassuring squeeze. You good? Lyra nods, her breathing steadier now. I'm good. Thanks, Maya. As Maya makes her way back to her seat in economy, the puzzle pieces begin to violently snap into place for Richard and the other first-class passengers who overheard the exchange. A storm of whispered questions bounces between the plush leather seats. Did she say she works for the kid chief financial officer? Who is this girl? Richard pulls out his phone reflexively, despite the flight restrictions. He opens his browser, about to type in the name Lyra Vance, before remembering he has no internet access at 30,000 feet. His expression has transformed completely. The dismissive annoyance is gone, replaced by an intense, burning curiosity, and the dawning, horrifying recognition that he may have seriously, catastrophically misjudged the entire situation. Meanwhile, back in economy, Daniel has been watching the entire interaction with a father's deep-seated concern. Eleanor notices his palpable tension. Your daughter doesn't like to fly, she asks gently. Just the turbulence, he explains, his eyes still fixed on the front of the cabin. She's fine otherwise. Her CFO usually travels with us for important meetings. She's good at helping Lyra through the rough patches. Eleanor processes this new piece of information with only a slight widening of her eyes, the only outward indication of her profound surprise. I see. Before their conversation can continue, the captain's voice returns to the intercom, his tone more serious than before. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected and severe weather conditions ahead. For your safety, we'll be diverting our route significantly to the south to avoid the worst of this system. Our flight time may be extended by approximately 20 minutes. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts securely fastened until we have cleared this weather. A collective frustrated groan rises from the passengers, a sound that is quickly silenced by another jarring bump that sends a drink cart rattling loudly in the galley. As the plane banks hard into its new southerly course, no one aboard realizes that this minor weather delay is about to become the very least of their concerns. Because 30,000 feet below them, at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, security personnel are just receiving an anonymous high-priority alert. An alert that will fundamentally change the trajectory of Flight 714 in ways no one could possibly anticipate. And the catalyst for this very serious security alert can be traced directly back to the ugly seating dispute and the man who, in a fit of pique and wounded pride, just used the brief lull in turbulence to make a single, fateful phone call. The turbulence gradually subsides as Flight 714 adjusts its southerly course, leaving behind a cabin full of relieved but rattled passengers. Lyra's breathing has returned to normal, her momentary anxiety replaced by a mild embarrassment at having once again been the center of so much attention. She chances a glance across the aisle at Richard Harrison, who is no longer working. He now regards her with an expression of undisguised, intense curiosity. So he begins closing his laptop to give her his full attention, a gesture that feels both belated and significant. You're that Lyra Vance. She tilts her head slightly, a spark of her usual wit returning. I wasn't aware there were others. The unexpected touch of dry humor catches Richard completely off guard, eliciting a short, surprised laugh despite himself. Etheria, right? The educational gaming platform. Lyra gives a small, non-committal nod, her natural caution with strangers, a habit drilled into her by her father and her legal team, still firmly in place. My nephew uses it, Richard continues, a new, genuine warmth creeping into his tone that wasn't there before. He has severe dyslexia. Your program, it's been well transformative for him, to be honest. Something in his voice, an authentic note of gratitude, causes the wall around Lyra to lower just slightly. I'm glad it's been able to help him. He went from despising school, from fighting my sister every morning, to actually looking forward to his etheria time. That's no small thing. Richard pauses, and for the first time he looks genuinely conflicted, wrestling with his own recent behavior. I owe you an apology, he says, the words sounding foreign and uncomfortable in his mouth. I made assumptions that were unfair and frankly, unacceptable. Before Lyra can process this sudden apology, or even decide how to respond, a different flight attendant, a young man named Michael, approaches her seat. He holds a tablet in his hand, his expression professionally neutral, but with a tense underlying seriousness that immediately puts Lyra on high alert. Ms. Vance, he confirms quietly. The captain would like to speak with you. A cold flutter of alarm passes through her. With me? Why, he didn't specify, ma'am. If you'll just follow me to the cockpit. Richard's eyebrows shoot up. Is something wrong? Michael maintains his composed flight attendant mask. Nothing to be concerned about, sir. Just a routine matter. But there is nothing, absolutely nothing routine about a passenger being summoned to the cockpit mid-flight, and everyone in the first-class cabin who overhears this exchange knows it. Lyra rises slowly, her mind racing through 1,000 dreadful possibilities. Has something happened to her mother back in Austin? Is there a problem with their security detail in Seattle? Should I get my dad? She asks, glancing back toward the economy cabin. The captain asked for you specifically. Ms. Vance. Michael replies, his tone polite but firm, already moving toward the reinforced door at the front of the aircraft. This way, please. As Lyra follows him, the small space of the galley feeling suddenly vast and exposed, she catches sight of her father. He is alert, watching his body tensed. She gives him a small, helpless shrug to indicate her confusion, and he immediately unbuckles his seatbelt to follow them. At the cockpit door, Michael knocks a specific coded pattern. The door opens to reveal Captain Miles Corrigan, a veteran pilot in his late 50s, with the weathered face and steady, unshakable demeanor of someone who has navigated 1,000 storms, both literal and metaphorical. Ms. Vance. He greets her with a formal, respectful nod. Thank you for coming up. I apologize for the unusual request. Behind her, Daniel arrives, slightly breathless. What's going on? Why do you need to speak with my daughter? Captain Corrigan takes in the protective father with a measuring professional glance. Mr. Vance, I presume. Good. I'm glad you're both here. Please step inside for a moment. My first officer will continue monitoring our systems. The cockpit is a compact, high-tech marvel, a universe of glowing displays, switches, and complex instrumentation surrounding the pilot and co-pilot seats. The first officer, a sharp, focused woman in her 40s, acknowledges them with a brief, efficient nod before returning her full attention to the controls. Captain Corrigan closes and locks the cockpit door behind them, ensuring their absolute privacy from the rest of the passengers. I've just received a rather unusual communication from ground security at SeaTac. He begins, his voice low and serious without any preamble. It seems someone has called in a security concern, specifically regarding you, Ms. Vance. Lyra blinks in utter confusion. What kind of security concern? The caller claimed you are traveling under false pretenses and are using fraudulent identification. The captain's tone remains professionally neutral, but his eyes are sharp, intently assessing their reactions. Daniel stiffens, his protective instincts flaring. That's not just absurd, it's preposterous. My daughter's documentation is completely unimpeachably legitimate. I understand this may be upsetting. Captain Corrigan continues his calm, unshaken, but I am required by federal law to take all security alerts seriously, no matter how improbable they may seem. He turns to Lyra directly, his gaze softening slightly. Can you tell me the purpose of your visit to Seattle? A business meeting. She answers promptly, her voice steady. With Horizon Ventures, they are considering a major Series B investment in my company. Your company, the captain repeats, his expression betraying nothing. And that would be Etheria Educational Technologies, Daniel interjects, his voice tight. My daughter is the founder and CEO. She is presenting her global expansion plan to their board this afternoon. Captain Corrigan absorbs this information, his gaze moving slowly between the determined father and the poised, impossibly young girl. I see. And you have documentation confirming your identities and the details of this meeting. Lyra reaches for the tablet she brought with her. I have my passport, the full email chain confirming the meeting, our detailed pitch deck, and all of our company's incorporation documents. Also, my chief financial officer, Maya Ortiz, is on this flight in seat 18D. She can verify everything. The captain accepts the passport first, examining it carefully, tilting it under the cockpit light, before returning it with a slight, affirming nod. This certainly appears to be in order. However, the security alert was quite specific. The caller alleged that you, Mr. Vance, are using your daughter as a front for questionable international business activities. Daniel's expression darkens. That is not just false, it's a malicious, offensive lie. Who made this claim? Who made this call? The call was anonymous, Captain Corrigan replies, his gaze unwavering. But it was placed approximately 20 minutes ago, shortly after we took off from Austin. The timing registers instantly a gut punch for both Lyra and Daniel. 20 minutes ago. That was exactly when the ugly, protracted seating dispute in first class had finally ended. It was him, Lyra says, her voice quiet but certain. It was Mr. Harrison, the man who wanted my seat. Captain Corrigan neither confirms nor denies her conclusion, maintaining his professional, impenetrable demeanor. I cannot speculate on the source of the call. What I can tell you is that we now have a security situation that requires immediate resolution before we are cleared to land at our intended destination in Seattle. Federal security protocols mandate that we investigate any credible threat before proceeding. But this isn't credible. Daniel argues, his voice tight with a controlled, righteous anger. This is harassment. It's a targeted attack, plain and simple. Nevertheless, the captain continues, his voice firm. I have been instructed by air traffic control and the TSA to divert this aircraft to Portland, where federal security personnel will board to verify all identities and documentation related to this alert. The implications of that single word, divert, hit Lyra like a physical blow. But our meeting? We'll miss our meeting with Horizon. I am truly sorry, Ms. Vance, the captain says, and for the first time, he sounds it. But once a security protocol of this nature is activated, I have absolutely no authority to override it. My hands are tied. Daniel places a steadying hand on his daughter's shoulder, a silent message of support. This is racial profiling, he says, his voice low but firm, locking eyes with the captain. You must see that. Captain Corrigan meets his gaze directly without flinching. What I see, Mr. Vance, is a situation that I am legally and professionally required to handle according to a strict, non-negotiable procedure. My personal opinions on the matter are unfortunately not relevant here. The first officer speaks up for the first time, her attention still locked on her instruments. Captain Portland approaches on the line, asking for our final confirmation of the diversion. Corrigan nods grimly. Tell them we are proceeding as directed. ETA 40 minutes. He turns back to the Vances. I will be making an announcement to the other passengers momentarily. In the meantime, I suggest you return to your seats and gather any documentation that might expedite the verification process once we land in Portland. As they step out of the sterile quiet of the cockpit and back into the charged atmosphere of the main cabin, the crushing reality of what is happening finally begins to sink in for Lyra. Years of tireless work building her company, months of intense preparation for this one specific meeting. A meeting with investors who could help bring Etheria's life-changing technology to the most underserved communities on the planet, all of it potentially derailed because one angry, prejudiced man couldn't accept that a black child belonged in first class. The sheer, naked injustice of it burns in her throat like acid. She returns to her seat where Richard Harrison watches her approach with a new, keen interest. Everything all right? He asks, a note of seemingly genuine concern in his voice. Before she can even think of how to answer, the captain's voice crackles over the intercom, addressing the entire plane. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an unforeseen security matter that requires our immediate attention on the ground, we will be diverting to Portland International Airport. Upon landing, security personnel will board the aircraft to address this situation. We ask for your patience and full cooperation during this process. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for our arrival in Portland. A wave of confused, angry murmurs sweeps through the plane. Richard Harrison's expression shifts from simple curiosity to sudden genuine alarm as he processes the captain's announcement. A security matter. What's happening? Lyra turns and meets his gaze directly. Her young face is suddenly imbued with a maturity far beyond her years, her eyes holding his with a calm, piercing clarity. Someone, she says, her voice low and steady, called in a false security alert about me. They claimed I'm traveling with a fraudulent passport. The color drains completely from Richard's face. He looks as though he's been punched in the gut. What, who? Who would do something like that? Lyra doesn't answer him. She doesn't need to. Her steady, unwavering gaze speaks volumes, a silent accusation more powerful than any words could be. Behind her, Daniel has returned to his seat in economy, where he is explaining the situation in hushed, urgent tones to Eleanor Vance and Maya Ortiz. The news spreads like wildfire through the cabin. Whispered speculations, worried glances, passengers pulling out their phones to check watches and calculate how this unexpected and dramatic delay will shatter their carefully laid plans. As the plane begins its slow descent toward Portland, the full cascading consequences of this chain of events have yet to unfold. What began as a petty, ugly seating dispute has now escalated into a full-blown federal security incident. An incident that will force confrontations with prejudice, privilege, and the corrupting nature of power that no one aboard Flight 714 could possibly have anticipated when they boarded in Austin just a few short hours ago. And for Lyra Vance, child prodigy tech innovator, and now the unwilling center of a dangerous controversy, not of her making the real test of her resilience, her strength, and her spirit, is only just beginning. Because the forces that have been set in motion are far larger and far more sinister than even she can yet imagine. We're in the middle of a nail-biter, folks. If you're on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. What do you think will happen when they land in Portland?